Aden Albireo was once called the hero who saved the world from the monarch of the underworld, also known as the Underlord, who had stained half the world with blood. He fought against the monarch of the underworld and succeeded in killing him. However, that victory did not come without a hefty price. The moment the Underlord died, a curse fell upon Cain, and darkness started to consume his body. In that moment, Cain looked at the other warriors who fought alongside him and asked them if they knew this would happen from the beginning. They told him that he was right. The guy with the ponytail told Cain that whoever defeats evil becomes evil, according to a legend passed down from the imperial family. He told Cain that the monarch of the underworld is not a person but a perpetual existence. The moment someone defeats the monarch, he becomes the new monarch of the underworld, keeping the position always occupied. The ponytail man smirked at Cain, telling him that it would be a great honor for him, who is called the Dragon Slayer King, to take up this mantle and sacrifice himself for the country. The knight behind him said that they simply had no other option but to let him defeat the Underlord to protect their country. He said he wouldn't ask Cain for forgiveness, and this statement enraged him even more. Finally, the magician told Cain to rest in peace because he had been working hard all this time. She used a grand sealing spell on him, and in the moment Cain was being sealed away, he looked at the faces of the people he once thought were his friends. He trusted them with his life, but in the end, they were the ones who betrayed him. Cain soon felt himself drowning in a bottomless sea where he had been trapped by his so-called friends. There seemed to be no concept of time or space there, and Cain kept falling, with only the thought of revenge in his mind. He cursed the traitors and swore to kill them with his own hands, but the voice came out of another person's mouth. The servants around him freak out upon hearing him talk, and they ask if he is all right. Cain is confused and wonders where he is and who all these people are kicking up a fuss around him. A couple, acting like his parents, come there, and they are moved to tears on seeing that he is awake again. Cain is confused, and as he gets up to see everyone staring eagerly at him, he just asks them who they are. His mother says that he has been sleeping for 2 whole days, so his mind must be lagging in real time. She hugs him, introduces herself as his mother, and tells him that his name is Cain Ramez. Cain is confused about when his last name changed, when suddenly he feels a sharp pain in his head as the memories of Cain Ramez come flooding into his mind. He is confused, but then suddenly, he learns something that completely changes his understanding of the situation. It is currently the imperial year 450, which is 15 years before he died. The last thing he remembers is being trapped inside the bottomless void, where he committed suicide rather than suffering in solitude eternally. He is certain that he died, but now that he has a second chance at life, Cain plans to use it to find the traitors and kill them one by one. His words strike terror in the hearts of the servants, but then he suddenly remembers that the previous owner of this body was a non-recyclable piece of human garbage who had no respect for anyone and did just as he pleased. Cain panics on realizing that he came back to life in the body of a useless scumbag, and his threats would have the same effect on the servants. The reason he was passed out for 2 days was because he got drenched in rain after drinking too much. Cain thinks that if this person were not the Duke's son, he would have already been beaten to death by people. Later, Cain looks into the mirror and wonders if he really was a hero or if it was all a hallucination. He decides to judge the truth by seeing if he has his powers. He activates the system to find that he still has his powers, although all his titles have been locked since he doesn't meet the qualifications to use them. Cain received the power of the system by consuming the heart of the Berserker dragon. On seeing that he still has it, he is certain that he was Albireo in the past. However, what bothers him is that the system doesn't display his last name properly. But he doesn't care that much. All he cares about is using his power to extract vengeance on the traitors. However, as he is graphically describing how he will punish them, one servant comes there with tea, and he gets terrified of being punished. He offers Cain his tea nervously, and Cain thanks him, further bamboozling the servant, who can't understand what the word thank you means from the mouth of his master. He almost freezes in his place, so Cain sends him away, and outside, the poor servant tells his coworker that Cain thanked him. Cain also realizes that he should be mindful of his actions in this body. He then begins wondering what happened to his real body if his soul is here. He wants to find it out immediately, so he runs outside and calls the green-haired servant named Philip to answer some questions. Philip obviously thinks that the question will be regarding his last wish before death, but Cain just wants to ask him about the mercenary king's disciple, because 15 years before his death, he was stuck in that position. Philip tells him that the mercenary king has gone missing, which was the same thing that happened in the previous timeline. But to Cain's surprise, Philip has not heard anything about the mercenary king having a disciple. Cain is shocked to hear this because he was quite famous in his last life by this time. He wonders, if the mercenary king doesn't have a disciple, what happened to his original self? In his past life, when Cain was a kid, he used to live in a ghetto and he was a skilled pickpocket. One day, he decided to try his hands on a mysterious stranger and swiped his purse. He was happy to see the money in the purse, but little did he know that his life was going to change at this moment. The man he stole money from found him, and Cain was terrified. That man was Balkan, the king of mercenaries, and he grabbed him and took him as his disciple because he saw that Cain had a body fit to be a warrior. Cain didn't even understand what was going on, but Balkan was already dragging him away, saying that he would train him to be the best mercenary. Long story short, since then, Cain has made a name for himself as a disciple of the mercenary king Balkan. Later, when he defeated the Berserker dragon, he earned the nickname Dragon Slayer King. However, in this life, the servant is claiming that he has never even heard rumors about the mercenary king having a disciple, much to Cain's shock. A couple days later, the servants are talking about how their young master has suddenly changed. He is not throwing things at them when they make mistakes and has even started calling them by their names. Not just that, he has been thanking them, and all that is just too surreal for them to accept. They think that it must be because he changed after the near-death experience. However, they are also worried about him because he looks listless and empty nowadays. Well, the reason Cain is so spiritless is because he has nothing to do. In his last life, he was a hustler and had to do everything himself, but in this life, everything from his food to his laundry is taken care of by servants. In his spare time, he tried searching for Aden Albireo, but it seems he doesn't exist in this world. Cain is confused now because if he doesn't exist in this timeline, can he get revenge on the traitors because they won't betray him here? Just then, his attention goes to the knight sparring in front of him. Just then, the younger brother of Cain Ramez, Carl, comes there and rudely asks Cain what he is doing here. Cain knows that Carl has all the good qualities that are needed from a noble son, and despite being the second son, he has the right to succession to the duchy too. However, the problem is that he absolutely hates his elder brother's guts. He asks Cain what he is doing here and tells him to go somewhere else and drink himself silly. Cain doesn't really have anything to say back because he knows that Carl has good reasons to hate his elder brother. He tells Carl that he was watching the night trainees because he was bored, but he gets angry at that too and tells him that this is not a show. He tells Cain to get lost if he is not going to spar, and Cain suddenly realizes that he has not held a sword in a long time. So he agrees to spar and goes to the training ground, where the knight kneels before him before starting the sparring session. The other trainees are worried because they know of Cain's reputation, and even the knight sparring against him is completely perplexed. He feels that if he fights normally, he will easily defeat the scummy elder son of the Duke. But if he does that, he can kiss his job goodbye. On the other hand, if he loses to him, he doesn't have any way to make it believable. Cain can sense that the redhead knight wants to lose on purpose, but he also wants to have some fun with him. He tells him to give it his all and not lose on purpose, because if a knight trainee can't defeat a useless alcoholic, he isn't any good either. He even threatens to fire the knight if he loses, and Carl thinks that his trash elder brother has finally lost it. Anyway, the trainee knight is furious upon hearing Cain's words, and he seriously charges at him. But Cain parries his attack. However, since his body is weak, he feels the effect of exchanging blows with the knight trainee immediately. Still, he wants to continue sparring, and the two men keep clashing their practice swords. The other trainees curse the redhead, wondering how he can go all out against their master's son. But they are also curious about how Cain can keep up with him. Cain is still standing firm, but the redhead has started to slouch because of exhaustion. Cain attacks him because he is enjoying swinging around a sword after what seemed like an eternity trapped in the void. He pushes the trainee back, and no one can believe it. They know that Cain used to be so weak that even street dogs could beat him in a street fight. But they don't know that the soul controlling that weak body is the hero called the Dragon Slayer King. Cain manages to make the trainee break his guard and then thrusts his sword at him, forcing him to accept defeat. No one can believe that one of their best trainees lost to Cain, who just goes to Carl to thank him for letting him enjoy such a refreshing spar. Carl can only affirm because he has nothing else to say. Cain takes his leave, saying that he will return here every once in a while to spar, and everyone is even more confused about this change in his personality. However, the after effects of the duel begin to show themselves by night. Cain's body has worn out, and it is trembling because of the light spar. However, his mind has become much calmer and lighter after venting out his frustration through some exercise. He plops on the bed and begins to think about the traitors again, who are all as strong as entire armies, and taking them down won't be easy even for him. On top of that, they have high status, making them unreachable most of the time. There is the Night King Sylvetta, who is the heir to the Seer's Duchy, the chosen saint of the Carnage cult, Spica, and the Archmage Shala. The final person on the revenge list is the second Imperial Prince of the Immortalia Empire, and the Grand Alchemist, Calcis. Cain knows that right now he is no match for any of them, and if he messes things up, he will have to face all three of them together. That is why he needs to defeat them one by one before they join hands in 5 years, when the allied forces will be created to subjugate the dangerous warlocks. To do that, the first thing Cain needs to do is make his body fit for fighting, because in his current state, even a goblin would beat him in one-on-one combat. The next day, he gives a list of things to buy to Philip, who panics on reading it, and then coldly asks Cain what he is planning to do now after being quiet all this time. Well, the list that Cain gave him has some top-level medicinal herbs, but they have things like Hell Lily, Angst Flower, and Lunatic Grass, which are all highly poisonous. Cain knows that he cannot explain things to Philip in a way he will understand, so he decides to act like the scum the previous owner of the boy was. He places a hand on the servant's shoulder and then acts menacing as he asks him if he is sure he wants to know what he plans to do with the herbs. He asks Philip if he wants to be his toy after learning his plans, and the poor servant freaks out. Cain keeps acting like a vile villain, saying that he can only imagine how much fun he will have, and the poor Philip immediately storms off to buy the things without question. Well, Cain knows how to reach superhuman levels faster than anyone else. He could not do that in his past life because he had limited resources, but as the son of a duke with a lot of money, he can do what he wants to get strong quickly. 1.5 months later, Cain has made considerable progress with his body. The method of training he is following is rather odd. He trains his body to its limits and then drinks mana potions to restore his energy and heal it quickly. 1 bottle of mana potion costs as much as a commoner's salary, but Cain can easily afford a lot of them thanks to his daddy's money. However, that is just the base, and the real thing is the poisonous herbs that he made Philip buy. He looks at the poisonous herbs and thinks about the theory proposed by Calcis and Shala, according to which, upon consuming poison, the body can unlock its full potential by trying everything to survive. Cain knows that he can die from the poison, and that is enough to terrorize him. But as a wise man has said, do it even if you have to do it scared. So Cain simply puts the Hell Lily in his mouth and then gulps another poison. But what he was not ready for was the horrible taste of the plant. The taste itself is potent enough to bring him to his knees, and he has to keep eating these medicines many more times to unlock his full potential. However, just by fighting against the poison once, his mana flow has improved significantly. Just then, Cain hears a menacing voice, asking the Dragon Slayer King if it is fun. Cain recalls the voice that is enough to send him into panic mode. He looks around and demands that the person who called him show himself. There is no doubt in his mind to whom this voice belongs, because this voice has been stuck in his head for all eternity. Just then, Philip comes running in to check on Cain, but he just gives him a death glare and tells him to get out quickly. After he is alone once again, Cain begins pondering about the voice he heard that definitely belonged to his greatest nemesis, the Underlord. He wonders how he could find him and know his secret when he once again hears the voice of the monarch of the underworld, saying that he got caught. He greets the mortified Cain, who quickly gets furious and yells at the Underlord, asking how the hell is he here when he definitely destroyed him the last time. He keeps looking around to find the source of the voice, but the Underlord tells him that he can't find him since he has no physical body at the moment. Cain asks how he can talk to him without a body, and the Underlord reminds him that when he killed himself in the void, he was in the middle of becoming the new monarch of the underworld himself. Cain immediately realizes what it means, and he asks if he is the Underlord now. The real Underlord tells him that the assumption is only half correct. The moment he died, he transferred his soul into Cain's body, and he planned to gradually take over his body to resurrect him to his full glory. Cain quips that his suicide must have failed his plan, and he finally understands that the Underlord's soul dwells inside him now. So he is the new Itadori and the new Naruto. The first question Cain asks is how he can kill the Underlord's soul, and that sends a shiver down the monarch's imaginary spine. Cain thinks of bathing in holy water, and if things need to be taken to extremes, he is ready to die along with the Underlord for the sake of the world. The Underlord panics on hearing this and pleads with him to stop, saying that he has changed, which reminds me of the 3rd time my toxic ex tried to get back into my life. Cain is not going to fall for these words, unlike me, and asks how the entity that loves nothing else but chaos and destruction can change. The Underlord tells him that the madness and chaos inside him were because of his link to the demon god, and the moment they were trapped in the void, the link was shattered. Cain is inclined to believe him because right now, the Underlord is much calmer than before, when he used to revel in the agonizing screams of humans. Cain asks the Underlord about the demon god he mentioned because he has never heard about him before. The Underlord says that the demon god is called the original sin, and it is actually the accumulation of all evil. The demon god is evil that has gained consciousness, and even the gods are wary of it. Underlord says that in the past, he was cursed to carry out the demon god's will, and Cain asks him another question to follow up. He asks Underlord if traveling 15 years into the past and occupying another body is also part of his plans. Underlord affirms, saying that when he entered Cain's body, he tried using the dragon's mana within his body to turn back time. Cain freaks out on hearing this because he could have invented time travel anytime he wanted. The Underlord tells him that dragons were created by gods to be their agents, so they have some power over the laws of nature. Cain asks Underlord why he didn't just escape from the void instead of turning back time, and just as he is about to give the answer, Underlord says that he is tired and needs to rest now. So he leaves Cain on read and vanishes, which is the same thing my ex did. Another month passes, and Cain has been occasionally talking to the monarch of the underworld. Though Cain is creeped out by having Underlord's soul inside him, he is also relieved that there is someone who knows the timeline he came from. In the meantime, he has been working on his body and has gotten a lot stronger. He accidentally cuts through the practice scarecrow with a wooden sword and realizes that he needs to get a stronger dummy to practice on. Just then, he sees the knight trainees practicing in front of him, and an evil grin appears on his face as he thinks of them as his new dummies. Even the Underlord is taken aback by the capacity for evil he possesses. Cain is irritated, so he threatens to drink a whole bottle of holy potion because that has the same effect on Underlord as stepping on Lego has on a normal guy. Just then, Cain notices a knight trainee who looks familiar. The instructor chews him out for his wrong posture, and in that conversation, Cain hears that the name of the trainee is Lucius. In the past timeline, Lucius was called the Free Knight because he was a mercenary who adhered to the principles of knighthood. That time, he had a flawed personality, but he was skilled and saved Cain's life on the battlefield many times. Even though Lucius was an S-rank mercenary just like Cain, he died in the fight against the Berserker dragon. Cain is kind of relieved to see a familiar face, and he immediately approaches Lucius and the instructor. Lucius asks if he is talking to him, and Cain immediately pulls the rank card and asks him to introduce himself properly. Lucius does so, but inside, he is not happy that the useless eldest son is wasting his time when he is already behind others. Cain just bends to see his face and recites the exact same words Lucius was thinking just now. Lucius freaks out as he tries to deny that, and he thinks that he should just quit being a knight. On the other hand, Cain is happy to tease him, and it is the first time he is glad that he is in a scumbag's body. He then tells Lucius to come to his training ground at night, and then whispers something in his ear that gets the knight trainee on the edge. He asks Cain how he knew about that, but he simply walks away, thinking that he should repay Lucius for all the times he saved him. At night, Lucius comes to meet Cain at the training grounds, and he trembles as he asks him if he already knew about his secret. Then suddenly, he bursts into tears, asking Cain if he can really fix his arm. In the past timeline, one night, Cain and Lucius were drinking when Lucius suddenly got sentimental about the biggest regret in his life that he could not do anything about. He wished that both his hands were intact so that he could become a proper knight like Cain and others. In the present, Lucius cries as he asks Cain if he can really fix his arm. Earlier, Cain whispered in his ear that his right arm was starting to get stiff gradually. Though Lucius doesn't respect him at all yet, he is willing to put his faith in him. Cain tells him that his arm is suffering from a case of mana vasoconstriction syndrome, which is the umbrella term for all disabilities in the mana channels. Lucius is shocked to know the reason behind his arm stiffening, because mana vasoconstriction syndrome is known to be an incurable disorder. Cain just tells him that it is not incurable for him because the cure will be discovered in about 10 years, and he already knows it. Cain tells the perplexed Lucius that he can easily treat his arm, but nothing in this world comes for free. He grins as he tells Lucius that they will sign a contract and presents the same to him. As the knight trainee opens the contract, he finds some ridiculous conditions there. It is almost like a slave contract, where Lucius has to do anything Cain commands and has to spar with him daily. There are other things as well, and Cain has no shame in saying that it is more or less a slave contract. Lucius thinks that Cain is just trying to fool him, but since it is something really important, he is willing to even grasp at the straws. He decides to accept the contract, and Cain laughs because he never thought that he would make Lucius his slave. A few days later, Cain and Lucius go to a small town called Marlene. Their carriage passes through a street full of beggars, and Lucius asks Kane if they are going to the right place. In return, Kane only asks him if he doubts him, and the night trainee panics as he refuses. Soon, they arrive at their destination, and Kane leads Lucius to a really shabby place. They stop in front of a drugstore, which has a rather unwelcoming notice board. Kane knows that Lucius came here in his past life too, because there was someone researching the mana vasoconstriction syndrome here, but the treatment could not succeed. They enter the drugstore and begin looking around since no one is there. Lucius stops in front of a rather peculiar painting that Kane identifies as the Philosopher's Stone, which is no more than a superstition believed by all mages and alchemists. Kane knows it as an imaginary object that has enough power to bring the dead back to life, but he thinks that if time can be turned back, the dead can be revived too. Just then, someone approaches them from a dark room, saying that Kane is rather well-versed because he knows a lot about the Philosopher's Stone. On hearing the voice of the woman, Kane realizes something. She tells them that she is not taking any customers right now, and Kane simply asks Lucius to step outside for a bit. Once they are alone, Kane calls the woman named Kathy by her name and says he will get straight to the point. She is surprised that he knows her name, but he also knows that she is not a human but a werebeast. The woman is shocked and takes off her hood because it is no use keeping it on anyway. She is a red cat werebeast, and asks Kane how much he knows about her. Kane simply says that his knight is also suffering from mana vasoconstriction, just like her, and she freaks out that he knows her medical history. Kane says that he knows how serious her condition is, and without the special herbs she smokes all day, the condition will keep worsening. Kathy gives up trying to win against Kane in the war of information. She agrees to everything he says, but then tells him that she hasn't found any cure for the disorder, so she can't help his knight. Kane says that if she cures Lucius's arm, he will protect her and even fund her research in his territory. Kathy tries telling him that it is impossible, but then Kane gives her a paper that has the cure for the mana vasoconstriction syndrome. Kathy can't believe her eyes when she reads it. Kane knows about the cure in detail because the Prince Calcis used to talk about it a lot, but he knows that there are some things missing from his knowledge. That is why he sought out Kathy, who could build up on that incomplete information and come up with a cure quickly. He asks her if a cure is still impossible to find, and Kathy trembles in excitement as she asks him to give her half a month. Kane then says that he is not going to do this for free, and he needs the ring Kathy is wearing. She tries shaking him off, but Kane tells her that he knows exactly what the purpose of the ring is, and he definitely wants it. It is actually an artifact called the Ring of Speed that triples one's physical speed by 3 times for 10 seconds, 3 times a day. It is really helpful for surprise attacks and running away. It was because of this ring that Lucius became an S-rank mercenary, despite having just 1 arm. He knows that since Kathy is terminally ill, the ring is really vital for her safety. So he promises to protect her and tells her that if she shifts to the Duke's house, she won't need to worry about her safety anymore. Kathy has no problem with it as long as she can complete her research, but she asks Kane if he is sure that he wants to take a female werebeast to his house despite being a noble. Kane tells her that he is notorious for being a scum, so he doesn't care what people think about him. Kathy is taken aback by his words, but she just smiles and hands him the ring as she accepts his deal. They return to the Duke's mansion, where suddenly Philip comes running, looking for Kane and yelling that it is an emergency. He reveals that Carl has gone missing in the Monster Mountains, and Kane is shocked to hear that. Philip says that a couple days ago someone went missing in the Monster Mountains, and then Carl formed a search party to rescue that person. However, ever since then, they have had no contact with him, and now he is missing. Kane knows that the Monster Mountain only has insignificant monsters, but it may still be a cause for worry. He asks Philip about the search party to find Carl, and he replies that they are going to head to the mountain soon. Now Kane is worried, not about Carl, but about the fact that if he vanishes, he will have to become the successor to the duchy. He knows that with that, all his plans for revenge will be ruined. That is why he is determined to save him, no matter what. He tells Philip that he is going to join the search party too, so he should find accommodation for Kathy quickly. Philip has not even processed that yet, and then Kane turns to Kathy because he has a favor to ask her too. Kane then goes to his dad, Duke Ramez, who is really shocked to hear that he wants to join the search team too. He immediately declines permission because it is not only Carl who went missing but the skilled knights with him too. The Duke believes that the place is too dangerous to let Kane go there. Well, Kane suddenly pulls an acting 101 on his dad, shedding fake tears as he says that he can't bear to imagine that something may happen to his brother. Well, that's not completely false, because if anything happens to Carl, Kane's plans will be ruined. The Duke suddenly hugs him, saying that he didn't know he cared about his family so much. He gives him permission to go to the mountain and tells him to be careful. He entrusts Kane's safety to the knight's vice captain, Spiel, who thinks that he has to deal with a useless burden. Soon, their group reaches the monster mountain, where they find signs of a fight. Kane finds a knife used by goblins, but he can't think that Carl and the knights could be overpowered by mere goblins. Also, there are no tracks, but goblins are not smart enough to erase their tracks either. Kane thinks that the only goblin that could do this is a hobgoblin that is stronger and more intelligent as well. He tells Spiel that hobgoblins must be behind this, and the vice captain panics because even he will have a hard time against hobgoblins. He suggests retreating to prepare some more, but Kane thinks that if they do that, the chances of Carl dying greatly increase. He orders Spiel to bring a search dog, and the knight replies that they already let the dogs go, but they couldn't find anything. Kane tells him to stop talking and bring a dog. He feeds the search dog with a suspicious medicine, which boosts its sense of smell greatly. Thanks to the potion that Kane asked Kathy to make before leaving, the dog can find the trail of the missing people. They follow the trail and reach the goblin village deep in the forest by nightfall. Carl and the other knights are imprisoned by the goblins, but Kane can tell that something feels off. There are 3 hobgoblins in the village, but that should be impossible because 3 boss-level monsters cannot coexist in one village. Anyway, Spiel gets ready for action and rallies his knights. He tells Kane that while they are fighting, he should rescue the hostages and escape with them. Kane agrees to do so because, even though his sixth sense is tingling, he feels that the knights can handle 3 hobgoblins on their own. Soon, Spiel commands his men to charge at the goblin village, alerting all the goblins on purpose. The hostages are really happy that the knights came to rescue them, when suddenly Kane breaks the lock of their cell. Everyone is shocked to see him there, but Kane simply cuts off their ropes and takes command. He tells the knights to help the search party and asks the villagers to escape using that time. He is about to take his leave as well, when suddenly the trembling Carl asks him to look behind him. A giant troll monster attacks Kane, who somehow escapes. However, now he has realized the dire situation they are in. The reason there were 3 hobgoblins in this settlement was because a higher-ranking monster was in charge. And it is a troll, the worst humanoid monster. Kane tells Carl to take the villagers and run away, and Carl yells that he will die if he fights it. Kane confidently tells him that he won't die and draws out his sword. He rushes towards the troll, who tries punching him but misses. Kane speeds past him and deals a deep slash to his leg to immobilize him. However, the troll has super regenerating powers, and the wound vanishes in no time. Kane knows that in his current state, he can't defeat a troll in a fight, but there are other ways. On the other hand, Spiel has also noticed Kane fighting the troll, and he rushes to help him. However, Kane doesn't need his help, as he does cartwheels in the air to dodge the troll's attacks. He takes out the ring of speed he got from Kathy and activates it. As the countdown starts at 10 seconds, Kane moves faster than the eye can see, dealing numerous slashes to the troll. Just as the time limit is about to expire, he attacks with his full strength, covering his sword in blue energy that helps him hack off the troll's head. Spiel is shocked to see the blue light coming from Kane's sword, because it means that he has achieved the high-level feat of using sword aura, which even Spiel has not been able to do. However, it was too much for Kane to use at his level, and he loses consciousness because of it and dives straight into the nearby trees. He struggles to stay conscious, as he thinks that just using the sword aura for less than 10 seconds has rendered his body immobile. However, he is glad that he could take down the troll. Meanwhile, the knights have started looking for him. The next day, the Duke receives a report from Spiel that many people were injured in the rescue mission last night. He orders Spiel to properly compensate the families of the victims, but then he comes to the main question and asks if it is true that Kane defeated the troll, whose body is being hauled outside. When Spiel gives the confirmation, the Duke can't believe that Kane can use sword aura and defeat a powerful monster. Later that night, Kane begins meditating to sharpen his control over his mana. Because he used the sword aura for a moment, his mana capacity seems to have increased a bit. However, he now knows how weak he is, and that frustrates him to no end. He wants to grow strong to crush his enemies when, suddenly, he hears Underlord's voice, saying that he is impressed by his determination. Kane notices a tiny devil in front of him and panics, but then suddenly, he recognizes him. Underlord laughs and says that he guessed it correctly, but on seeing his cute form, Kane bursts out laughing. He asks Underlord what is with that look, and he gets angry at him, saying that this is all because he is too weak. When Kane finally calms down, he asks the Underlord how he can manifest a physical form now. Underlord replies that only Cain can see him right now, but as he grows stronger, he might be able to project himself to others as well. Cain doesn't like the fact that he has to keep seeing Underlord from now on, and the tiny devil takes offense to that. Moving on from that, Cain says that since he became Underlord only after his contract with the demon god, he must have had a separate identity before. Cain asks Underlord for his real name, but he sadly tells him that he lost his real name a long time ago, and now he is only called Underlord. Well, Cain decides to name him Curse from this moment on because he was a curse placed on him. Underlord is not pleased with that name, but Cain has no intention to change it, so he accepts his new name. After 1 week, Cain goes to visit Kathy in her new lab, and she welcomes him, calling him Troll Master. Cain is not pleased with this nickname because it sounds like he has the appearance of a troll. Anyway, Cain asks Kathy about Lucius, and she points him to the bed inside. Cain goes there to find Lucius in tears and snots, and he happily says that his arm has started to move again. He immediately kneels before Cain, thanking him for treating him. Lucius swears to dedicate his life to Cain from this point, and he gladly accepts it because he plans to run him like a slave now. Cain then asks Kathy why she has not undergone the same treatment, and she tells him that her mana vasoconstriction is a bit unusual, so it needs more research. Cain tells her good luck and compliments her on her progress, but she thanks him for that, calling him Troll Master again. Cain is angry, but Lucius starts laughing, and that presses Cain's buttons and makes him even more mad. He tells Lucius to follow him because they have a lot of work to do. To his surprise, Lucius is more than willing to do any task. However, that soon backfires on him as he gets to do some really hard physical labor. Cain makes Lucius haul the troll's body to a merchant whose eyes are glinting with the thought of the money he can make off of it. He tells Cain that he has brought a fine specimen that will fetch a good price, and Cain gives him the list of the medicinal herbs he wants to purchase with the money. The merchant reads the list and says that they are not herbs but poisonous plants, but the menacing Cain hits him with the good old did I stutter, and he has nothing left to do but follow his orders. Cain is really happy about getting so much money as he reaches the mansion, when suddenly Phillips comes running to him and informs him that the Duke is looking for him. Cain goes to the Duke's office, and to his shock, he sees someone he didn't want to meet there. He is terrified of his father's guest, who examines his body and says that he looks like he can indeed cut down a troll. Cain dislikes the man with a burning rage because, in the past, he treated him quite badly. Curse asks him if he knows the man, and Cain informs him that he is a noble who looks down on mercenaries. Anyway, he introduces himself and greets the guest, who is actually Margrave Thor, the protector of the northeast frontier. Thor is impressed that he knows about him, but Cain says that he is very famous because he is one of the first people in the Empire who has reached the stage of Sword Master. The Sword Master stage is something that every knight dreams of. It is the domain of superhumans who are strong enough to cleave mountains with single strikes. Cain was a sword master in the past timeline too. Thor is impressed by Cain's words, and he tells the Duke that he has got a good son. Cain's dad then asks him if it is fine for him to be here because he recently heard that a group of orcs attacked his territory. Thor replies that the attack was more widespread than just his territory, and some suspicious movements were detected before the attack on the Carnage cult. Cain recalls the traitor Ironblood Saintess who was from the Carnage cult too, and he is once again reminded of his revenge. Meanwhile, Thor tells the Duke that powerful monsters have been appearing at places where they should not be, and he doesn't think that it is a coincidence. He wants to form an investigation squad to deal with it and asks the Duke if he would like to support him, and he gladly agrees. With that, Thor turns to Cain and asks him if he wants to join his knight order. At first, he did not believe that Cain had obtained the stage of sword aura within half a year of picking up a sword, but now that he sees him, he can clearly see his mana to confirm the news. He promises to make Cain the greatest swordman on the continent, and the Duke tries convincing Thor that his son is not ready for it. Thor promises to take good care of Cain and then turns once again to him to ask what he thinks about it. Cain replies that he appreciates the offer but will have to decline, shocking Thor. He asks Cain if he doesn't understand how great his offer is, but he just smiles and says that he can become a swordmaster on his own. He then confidently taunts the Margrave, saying that if they fought right now, he could at least leave a scratch on him. This ignites the competitive spirit of the Margrave, and he suddenly exerts a strong pressure that makes the entire room rattle. Cain knows that this power is called Master Sphere, which is the ability to make the air tremble just by releasing killing intent. However, Cain can endure the killing intent of a sword master. Thor remarks that he looks confident about his words earlier, and Cain offers to make a bet because he knows how susceptible the redhead Margrave is to betting. Cain tells Thor that if he can't scratch him even once, He will join his Knight Order, but if he can, Thor will give him his sword. The Margrave really gets furious on hearing this, but then he starts laughing at Kane's audacity to covet his family's heirloom. He turns to the Duke to say that his son is completely different from him, only to find the Duke passed out on the floor. Anyway, Thor accepts Kane's challenge, and Curse asks him if he always wanted that sword. He affirms, saying that he wanted to get the legendary sword, Beelzebub. They reach the training grounds, where Thor wields his legendary sword, and Kane asks if he is really going to use it against a much inferior opponent. The Margrave says that as a knight, he must give his all in a duel, and Kane curses him inside his mind. The conditions for their duel are that no one can use an aura sword, and Thor can't move his right foot. But Kane knows that it is not even a real handicap for a swordmaster like him. Soon, the fight begins, and Kane immediately charges at Thor, trying to get his neck, but he easily blocks his attack. He is impressed that Kane went for the neck, and he says that he must have experienced real combat. Kane then keeps attacking him, but as Thor blocks his attacks, he calls his swordsmanship as unrefined as that of the ragtag mercenaries. These words enrage Kane, and now he plans to defeat Thor with his ragtag swordsmanship. He rushes ahead and uses the sword techniques used by the mercenary king himself. Thor doesn't think anything of his techniques, so he stays relaxed. But Kane quickly bypasses his guard and shaves off a bit of hair from his beard, freaking him out. No one can believe that Kane just pushed a sword master on the back foot, and then Kane starts overwhelming Thor by keeping his under attack. Thor can only block because, even though the technique is messy, it targets all his vital points precisely. On seeing this, he gets even more determined to recruit Kane to his Knight Order and swings his sword at him with full strength. Kane barely dodges the attack that could have killed him without doubt. He backs away, and Thor asks him if this is all he has. He welcomes Kane to his Knight Order in advance, and Kane thanks him, but not for the reasons he thinks. He suddenly attacks Thor with a speed he was not ready to face and deals a slash to his shoulder. With that, Kane wins the bet, and he is happy that he can get his hands on the legendary sword Beelzebub now. Everyone is confused by what just happened, but they start cheering for Kane's victory. However, Underlord asks him if it was fair for him to use the Ring of Speed to beat the knight. He says that he is more suited to being a man of the underworld than a hero, and Kane tells him to shut up or he will drink some holy potion. Well, Thor doesn't know that Kane used an artifact, so he believes that Kane hustled him by hiding his true skill until the last moment and taking him by surprise. Kane acts humble, saying that it was pure luck, and Curse is really disgusted by him now. Kane's attention is on Thor's shoulder, however, because he thought that he would lose his arm because of the damage. But the cut isn't even deep. The Swordmaster gives the legendary sword to Kane as per the bet, and he gladly accepts it. He can't stop grinning because he hit the jackpot, and Curse starts calling him the Swindler King. At night, Kane checks his new sword, and then he angrily glares at the Underlord for disturbing him throughout the day. Curse ignores his glare, says that he can't use the sword properly, and adds that he knows about the lore behind the legendary swords that humans are unaware of. Kane is shocked and asks Curse what he means, but he says that he won't share the information for free. He tells Kane to promise that he will never drink holy potions again and accept him as his king. But instead of that, Kane just cuts his hand with the sword's blade. As his blood trickles down the sword, a blood pact is established between him and the sword, and Curse is shocked. He asks how he knew that, and Kane replies that he often saw his minions carrying dark swords and invoking their power this way. Well, Beelzebub is one of the 72 legendary swords, and while humans believe that they were just extra hard swords, there is a deeper truth behind them. The swords are actually made from the flesh of the corrupted monarchs who once ruled the ancient underworld. Each sword carries the power of a different corrupted monarch, and there are 3 conditions to unlock the power. The first one is to feed the sword blood and establish a blood pact. Curse is frustrated that Kane already knew about the blood pact because he was planning to turn him into his servant. But now Kane has the upper hand, and Curse bows down to him to avoid retribution. The next day, Kane goes to his dad and requests to join Thor's special investigation team. The Duke tells him that the place they are going is much more dangerous than the Monster Mountain, and he can't give him permission to go there. Kane says that Thor will be there, so they will be safe, and Thor laughs as he supports Kane. The Duke sighs as he still tries convincing Kane, but Thor tells him to let his son get some experience so he can become a fine warrior. Kane is happy that he is receiving support from Thor in this life, even though he was just an obstacle in his past life. Curse believes that Kane is so eager to join the investigation team to meet the second condition to activate the sword's power, and he is right. The second condition is to supply the sword with an enormous amount of vitality, and for that, He has to defeat monsters and absorb their life force. Cain is eagerly waiting for the day he finds the monsters, and Curse feels bad for the monsters now. Soon, Cain reaches Fort Attila along with the investigation team. The fort is just outside the Pyrenees Mountains to stop the monsters from attacking the kingdom. But Cain is really disappointed by the architecture and the quality of the soldiers, which makes him wonder how this place is still intact. Just then, the gates open, and Viscount Attila, the commander-in-chief of the fortress, welcomes Thor and Cain, almost calling him Troll Master. The guards behind him also begin gossiping loudly, insulting Cain without a care, calling him a scumbag, and the man who got his nickname because he looks like a troll. Lucius is furious upon hearing this, but Cain tells him to stay put. However, even Curse asks him what he plans to do to the guards who don't know their place. Cain has no plans to fight them. And on top of that, he has heard these insults too many times to get fazed by them. Luckily, Thor takes charge, saying that the air in this area is so fresh that a lot of bugs have come here and started making noise. He releases his terrifying aura with that, scaring the Viscount and his soldiers. Well, Cain is happy that Thor's attitude is helping him. Later, the Viscount takes Thor and Cain on a tour of the fortress, saying that reports of various monster attacks came from different estates. Cain asks him if anything happened here too. But Attila ignores him and tells Thor that they don't need to worry about anything here. He says that orcs have created a settlement in the middle of the mountains, and because of them, smaller monsters are not coming towards the fortress anymore. Cain thinks that is a pile of nonsense when Curse suddenly tells him that something huge is heading this way. Cain can't see anything, but when he gets the first indication that Curse is telling the truth, he immediately tells the Viscount to close the gates because monsters are coming. The Viscount dismisses him as a brainless manchild, but Thor also tells him to close the gates. The Viscount tries to convince him that there is no need, but then suddenly the ground begins to rattle as a huge horde of monsters rush towards the fortress. The guards are too terrified and wait for Attila's orders, but he is scared himself. So Thor takes command and tells the guards to close the gates first. The guards begin closing the gates, but one wolf monster slips in. Before it can attack the guard in front of him, Cain gets there and slashes the wolf. He notices that the sword is draining the vitality of the wolf, but then his attention goes to the people calling him Troll Master. The guard he just saved thanks him, and Cain gets flustered. He tells the guard to grab a weapon and defend the wall instead of thanking him. Just then, Lucius runs to Cain's side, who is busy staring at the monsters outside the gate. He snickers to himself, saying that from now on, these creatures will be his main course. He begins acting like a madman and almost licks his sword before returning to his senses and cringing over his actions. Curse laughs at him, saying that even he cannot resist the temptations of Beelzebub, the sword of gluttony. Cain is embarrassed because of what happened, but he needs to hunt down the monsters to awaken his sword's power anyway. However, luck is not on his side because Thor has plans to deal with the monsters himself. He jumps over the wall even as Cain yells at him to let him handle the monsters. Thor unleashes his enormous sword aura and kills all the monsters in a few swings. He laughs later and says that it has been a long time since he went all out, but Cain is still wiping his tears because he didn't get any action. Viscount Attila thanks Thor and Cain for alerting them in time, which allowed them to protect the fortress without any casualties. But then suddenly, Curse tells Cain that the giant thing he told him about earlier was not the monster wave. Cain is confused, but then he suddenly notices a giant fireball coming towards them. He is taken aback upon seeing it and immediately yells at everyone to be careful. The fireball hits the ground, and everyone panics. Seeing the size of the fireball, Thor wonders if a mage is trying to attack them, but Cain says that it is not a mage. Cain knows who is the cause of this incident because he fought the damned monster in his past life and almost saw his dead ancestors waving at him from the other side. In front of the fortress, a huge army of trolls and orcs is standing, and the guards are terrified of seeing them together. The Viscount can't believe that the orcs and trolls, who always used to keep fighting, are working together. Thor tells Cain that he will be right back after dealing with them, but Cain says that even he cannot handle everything alone. Thor asks him what he means, and Cain tells him to look at the back of the horde. There is a huge troll there, wielding a magic staff and wearing a robe. Thor is shocked upon seeing this monster for the first time, and Cain says that it is a calamity-level monster whose power is equal to that of a swordmaster. It is a high troll. Thor immediately tells Cain and the Viscount to evacuate the fort because he can't hold back the high troll for long. But Cain tells him that there is still a way to defeat it. He first tells Lucius to lead the troops and hold the orcs and trolls as best they can. Lucius takes off, and then Thor asks Cain what he is planning to do. He replies that the high troll is already powerful, but with an army under his command, he becomes many times more dangerous and difficult to subdue. He knows that even a sword master like Thor won't be able to bring him down, but there is a way for everyone to survive. He briefly explains his shocking plan to Thor and the Viscount while the soldiers fight against the monsters. The plan involves Thor running away from the place, but the Viscount is completely against it because he knows that the fortress will fall within minutes if he leaves. Just then, another giant fireball hits the fortress, and Thor asks Cain if he knows how ridiculous his plan sounds. Cain confidently says that this is the only way out, and asks the Margrave to trust him. Thor thinks about all the times Cain has exceeded his expectations, so he decides to trust him. However, he gives him a warning that if his plan fails, he will join his Knight Order. Thor leaps away with that, and then Cain turns his attention to the battle in front of them. Lucius manages to behead a troll alone, and Cain is proud because the poisonous herbs he gave him worked and he has become quite strong. However, there is one not so tiny problem. The trolls can't be killed just by beheading them right now. The High Troll uses his magic to reattach the head of the troll to its body and revive it. And Cain knows that he can do it endlessly, which makes him especially dangerous. Normally, one needs the attack power of a sword master or an archmage to properly annihilate the trolls, but Cain has a better way. The gluttony of Beelzebub suddenly overtakes his nature once more, and Cain begins baby-talking his sword, saying that he will give her plenty of treats. On the battlefield, Lucius is facing the revived troll, and he realizes that even though he became strong thanks to Cain's herbs, he is going to die now. He braces for an attack from the troll, but then suddenly he finds Cain on top of the troll's head. The troll is confused, but then Cain stabs its head with the legendary sword. Lucius tries warning Cain that stabbing the troll won't finish him, but Cain just tells his sword that it's dinner time. The gluttonous sword Beelzebub begins draining the vitality of the troll, who shrivels and dies, unable to get up again even using the High Troll's magic power. The High Troll can't believe that someone can nullify his powers, but Cain is still in crazy mode. He says that trolls are sure tasty, and they are as nutritious as dozens of wolves. He then gives a murderous glare to the orcs, licks his lips, and says that now he wants to try how the orcs taste. Well, the fight will continue raging, but the video comes to an end here. If you want to know what happens next and what Cain's master plan is to defeat the High Troll, demand part 2 of this video in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe.